So in chapter 1054 and chapter 1083, we are introduced to the concept of the Holy Knights. However, in chapter 1083, we are introduced to their silhouettes. However, again, I have to remind you all, when it comes to silhouettes in One Piece, they don't actually matter, because back in the day during Arlong Park, when we are introduced to the silhouettes of the warlords, we come to find out that we actually see like warlord characters in the story. They look nothing like their silhouettes. Then at the very tail end of Enies Lobby, when we were relaxing in Water 7 with the boys, Garp introduces us to Big Mom and Kaido. Big Mom and Kaido's silhouettes look nothing like they actually do as characters. So silhouettes are a bust. Going off of that, you know what's super interesting about every faction in One Piece? Going from our first big faction, Baroque Works, all the way down to recent factions in Cypher Pole Zero. There are moles. Not the animal, but spies, secret agents. In Baroque Works, you had Vivian Igaram. In Cypher Pole Zero, you have Stussy. In even the Galilog Company, you have the CP9 agents. So moles are a very prominent theme in One Piece factions. You could also say, too, in terms of pirate factions as well, you had both Virgo working for Doflamingo, and then on the flip, you had Rocinante, a Marine, working in Doflamingo's organization. So we've had both pirates working as moles for their pirate crews, and Marines working as pirates as moles for the Marines. With that being said, we know that there have been many moles in One Piece. Many spies, sometimes whole factions of spies, hiding within other factions. So why couldn't it be that one of our Yonko crews is actually a group of spies? Shanks is a Fed. Shanks is a cop. Shanks is a Holy Knight. Not just Shanks, the entire outfit of the Red Hair Pirates are all Holy Knights. Here is why I say this. Because throughout the narrative, whenever we see Shanks, he's always doing something that other Yonko simply don't do. For example, his presence stops the war, okay? No rebuttals from everybody else, no contests, no complaints. The war just stops when he shows up at Marineford, okay? Then, again, when he shows up to have an audience with the Gorosei, how did he get there? Why was he allowed an audience? He's a pirate, right? Why should he be allowed an audience with some of the highest authority in the land? It doesn't really make sense. Also, again, in the chapter when a lot of the bounties of the Yonko were being laid out and the makeup of their crews, what's so interesting about Shanks' crew, the Red Hair Pirates, is that his crew is the only crew that's designated as dangerous as a complete unit. Like, the boys that are in Shanks' top cabinet are all guys to be reckoned with. You don't get this with, say, Katakuri and the rest of the Sweet Commanders. You don't get this with the Calamities under Kaido. You don't get this even with the guys under Blackbeard, the 10 Titanic captains. This is not stated. And mind you now, Kuzan is a 10 Titanic captain, and even he isn't given this sort of respect. So it's really weird that Shanks' crew is given this sort of accolade amongst all other Yonko crews. I say that to say that his crew is the only crew that's given this respect by Sengoku and presumably the Marines. But it makes sense that he's being talked about in a villainous light, because that keeps up the facade of whom he actually is. Also, what's very interesting about Shanks, just in terms of how he exists in the story, it's very interesting that in Film Red, and I'm bringing up Film Red because Bluno and Khalifa were just confirmed as CP0 agents. So, like I always say, don't count movies out. But it was confirmed that Shanks has some sort of relationship to the Fairland family via his relationship to Uta, or Uta has a relationship to the Fairland family via her relationship to Shanks. Regardless, Shanks is somewhat related to the Fairland family. We don't know what that is, but it sounds like a celestial dragon family. And going off of that, that brings up some other questions. You see, I find it very peculiar that every member of Roger's crew kind of just lives in solitude after Roger's demise. It's kind of weird that none of them were picked up. I think in this situation, Shanks's lineage, much like Buggy's, was discovered at one point, and he was set off to be this secret mole in the pirate world for the higher ups in the world government, because it doesn't make sense how many gray spots we have in his history. He didn't even want to go after the One Piece. So one could say now, because he wants to go after the One Piece and he's blowing away all the competitors that have a leg in the race, is because he's trying to protect the One Piece or guard it for the benefit of his benefactors in the world government. That to me makes more sense than him just being a free agent doing piratey things. It doesn't really add up. Also, we don't know where Shanks was from the time of the execution where he was talking to Buggy to where he recruited Ben Beckman. There are a lot of gaps here. So I think at some point he was picked up by the world government and trained, and then he's been LARPing as a pirate, as Roger, to prevent the One Piece from actually being discovered and from the world falling into chaos. Because once the One Piece is discovered, it's very highly implied that the world government is going to lose their authority on the people of the world. So that's what he's doing. Also, something to keep in mind: when someone has a sparkling reputation in One Piece and is seen as a hero, they're most likely a villain. Take Caesar Clown, for example. He was seen as a hero and a savior by his boys. However, it turns out that he was a piece of garbage. Now, before Shanks decimates Kid, what do we see? People actually fawning over Shanks like he's the best thing since sliced bread, like he's a Superman. This is very peculiar. No Yonko has given this much fanfare to this degree ever. There's always like a caveat somewhere. There's always sort of like a but somewhere. So for Shanks to be treated this cleanly, it's weird. It's weird, and it makes him look very suspicious. Here's what makes me very suspicious of Shanks as well. Okay, so when we first are introduced to Emu, Emu is holding a photo of Vivi. They have the photo of Shirahoshi torn up and stabbed through, along with the Warner posters of Blackbeard and Luffy. So, Blackbeard and Luffy are not feds. They aren't working for Emu, obviously, because they have a vendetta against these two pirates, because they see them as a threat. You know who's not mentioned in all those figures? Shanks. For all intents and purposes, Shanks should be the man closest to the One Piece, along with Whitebeard back in the day, because he was on Roger's ship. He knows Roger the most intimately. And if you wanted to compare someone to Roger in the current era, it would be Shanks. A man who dominates the seas with hockey, okay? No dough fruit as far as we know. So, why isn't Shanks on Emu's radar? Well, you wouldn't have an employee on your radar, would you? An employee wouldn't be on the hit list. That makes no sense. That's why I think, too, that Shanks is an employee of Emu, a holy knight. Now, as far as his relation to Luffy, and this is going into some evil Shanks theorization, I will admit, but it would make sense that he's giving the things that he gave to Luffy so that he could have a controlled opposition if, or perhaps when, Luffy reaches the One Piece. Perhaps he could sway Luffy to not do what he intends to do for the sake of the world as it stands now. Because it's very interesting that Shanks, with all the power that he presumably has, doesn't really upset the status quo and kind of keeps things leveled. Like when he meets with the Gorosei, he's warning them about Pacific Pirate. Why are you warning people who are presumably your enemy about a specific pirate when said specific pirate would most likely throw off the status quo of the world as it stands now? It's very weird how calculated and balanced Shanks has been presented throughout the narrative. But that's what I think. I think Shanks has inducted all of his boys, or perhaps they were part of high-ranking families at a point as well, and they're all LARPing as pirates and are all holy knights. But I don't really know where they would stand in that. I'm not too sure. I am leaning more towards all of them being from high-ranking families from the get-go, and then they were a controlled unit placed into the world to oversee the pirate scene. But yes, Shanks and his boys are all Holy Knights. When we see Dragon talk about the Holy Knights in 1083, the common conclusion that has been going around is that there are 9 of them. Well, disregarding Monster of the Red-Haired Pirates, there are 9 main guys on that crew. We have Shanks, we have Ben Beckman, we have Lucky Roo, we have Yasopp, we have Lime Juice, we have Bonk Punch, we have Building Snake, we have Hongo, and we have Howling Gab. On top of that, I know we've seen both Yasopp get recruited in Chapter 0, and I believe we see at one point, it might be in Chapter 0 as well, we see Ben Beckman get recruited. However, we don't really know the specifications of how the Holy Knights were formed. They could have had Shanks as like a new recruit at one point, and maybe he got up so high in the ranks that he could actually go out in the world and pick out talent. So what better way to look for talent than your home sea where your pseudo father figure came from, Roger. So that's why I could see how these guys sort of came about and how they became Holy Knights. Shanks handpicked them all, but give me your thoughts. If you like stuff like this, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Polipede Works. And if you like what you see, I would appreciate your subscription. Thank you so much. See you next time.